and welcome back to the Author Spotlight series, where we shine a light on authors and their amazing stories. Today, I'm joined by Eira Clarke, who is in a special position because she's going through her publishing journey, and we're going to get to know her a bit and talk about her publishing journey and get to know a bit more about her story. So, without further ado, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Lovely to talk to you.
Nice to talk to you too. So we're going to kick it off, first of all, by introducing who you are. So tell us a bit about yourself.
Sure, yeah. I'm Eira. I'm a 36-year-old mum of two. I live in London. I'm currently not in London. I'm currently got a beautiful writing view over a lake in Italy, which is fantastic, which is
phenomenal.
Yeah, nice to have a little break. But yeah, I at a point in my publishing journey where I'm kind of it's getting interesting now. so it's a really nice time to talk to you about it all.
Yeah, that's great. So when how did you first of all get into publishing? Like, what was it, that moment where you were like, I want to write? And then how did you go about choosing your journey?
Sure. That's a really good question. I have always written. I was one of these people writing Lord of the Rings fan fiction when I was like 13, at 3 o'clock in the morning in notebooks and on web pages and things like that. So I've always written and I've always loved to write, especially at school. It was my favorite subject. And then I think I kind of had the same period as a lot of people did, whereby I finished university and I just didn't read or write or anything for a good few years, because of jobs and because of kids, and life kind of gets in the way, I think.
Yeah.
And then I kind of just decided to pick it back up again. I've always been really sporty, and so sport kind of took precedence over writing for me for a really long time. But I actually got diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome last year, which has basically meant that I can't play rugby anymore, because that would be a really bad idea. And so that's kind of allowed me to sort of, I felt like, legitimately shelve my physical not career, but hobbies, I suppose. And then I really sort of just dove into it. And I don't think I really expected to ever finish the novel. Do you know, you get to a point where it kind of feels a bit insurmountable, and you're just like, oh, I'm just going to write a bit and see where it goes. And actually now I'm like editing, and it's got to a point where it's a bit bigger than I am now, I think.
Oh, that's great to know a bit more about that process. And a lot of people find writing therapeutic or like an escapism. Do you feel like that has contributed to like you writing?
I think so, yeah. I think that's definitely a part of why a lot of people do it. I think for me as well, it kind of allows some time for me. I think that's kind of it's the time when I sort of shut myself in a room and I'm like, I am writing, and it just allows me to be kind of more I love my kids and I love being mum, and I work a full-time job as well, and but sometimes it becomes a lot, and so you kind of just need that little corner that's just for you, and that's what writing has been for me.
Great to hear. So what made you to decide to pursue indie publishing over traditional routes?
I think it felt a bit less daunting. I think traditional publishing feels like this monster, whereby a lot of us feel, I think, the kind of imposter syndrome like looming over our shoulders.
Yeah.
And it definitely, for me, I kind of felt like, if I'm gonna write, and again, it's sort of like everyone says, write the story that you want to read, and I'm not. When I started this, I didn't really. I've had a lot of really good feedback, which is lovely, but I kind of didn't feel like many people would want to read it. And so I was sort of like, I'm going to write it and I will publish it and I will do it just for me and I will do it. And so the indie publishing route kind of felt like the best way to go, if that makes sense.
That really would resonate with a lot of our listeners, and a lot of other writers that I've sat down with have mentioned the same thing, where you have this kind of imposter syndrome, like you put it. And on top of that, of having that imposter syndrome. Like the traditional publishing route can be very daunting, and I guess like people don't realize that there's a lot of like costs attached to that as well. People are getting into publishing the first time around, they think, okay, you know, like if I get my traditional deal, you know, I'll be fine, I'll be set. It's like there's a cost attached to everything, like whether it's hybrid publishing, indie publishing, or traditional publishing. Whereas like traditional publishing, I guess it's like a lot more different, because maybe like you get your advance, but you don't get your royalties until you pay off that advance. So that's the cost there. And then you have to also like kind of leave behind some of that creative control you have on your book, the covers, the story that you want to tell. And it's just like a lot more freedom in indie publishing. Did you find that, how's that freedom working out for you, like having that creative freedom with your story?
100%. I completely agree with you. Like I've been working with I've worked with a graphic designer on the initial kind of front cover, because I knew exactly how I wanted it to look, and the colors involved, and you know, a lot of, I know people in traditional publishing, and they're like, well, if you're writing in this genre, you have to use this color in your cover, like even down to things like that. And I'm just like, but I don't like those colors. I want a different color, you know. And I get why, I understand why, but it just becomes, it feels like, and you know, writing in the romantasy space as well, I feel like we've got such a lovely kind of, it's not society, but such like a lovely, you know, you go on Bookstagram and Instagram, and you just, you talk to people, and all of these people have, they see your book, and they see your journey, and they see your story and everything differently. And it kind of feels like, with the whole grouping romantasies into a particular cover color, it feels like it's taking away some of the individuality of it, I suppose. And you know, I struggle with that a little bit. But also from a purely accessibility point of view, I think that you know, I'm quite lucky, because I'm actually a qualified proofreader and editor myself. So I still work with an editor, but you know, if I were to submit my manuscript, I feel like grammatically and, you know, things like that, it's in quite a good place. But I feel like a lot of people are quite sort of put off by the fact that if they feel like if their manuscript's not perfect when they send it to a trad pub house, that it's just immediately going to get thrown on the pile, you know, and it's just not going to be. So people have to invest money in the editors and in proofreaders and in cover, like even before they submit. And then that process takes 12 to 16 weeks. And you just feel like it's just a bit soul destroying, I think, sometimes from a looking at it from an outside point of view before looking at it. So I had a manuscript before this one. It's just been kind of put to the side, which I did submit to a trad pub house. And I basically got feedback back, and it was like, yeah, we loved it, but we didn't quite love it enough. You know, and I think it's just that, it's that enough bit that I think it really gives. That's what indie publishing gives to people. You know, if they want to twist things a little way, or they want to do something slightly different than the publishing houses want, then maybe this is the freedom to do so, which is nice.
Yeah, which is really nice. And also I just wanted to mention, like, with trad publishing as well, I just feel like publishing industry is like a very rejection-based industry. I like to tell people that regardless of like traditional or hybrid or indie publishing, like I feel like you have to be prepared to either be rejected in some aspect, and like the first time I faced rejection, I was very much like, okay, I was like, my soul was crushed. I was I was like, oh no, it's horrible, and everybody will ever read it. Oh, somebody's read it and they didn't like it, or they read it and they're like saying this part of my book is not that great, and I'm like, that's my favorite part, where it's important because of this. And it's like, you have to, like, I don't know, like once you get over that first hurdle, you just have to believe in your story, like enough for you to be like, okay, no matter what rejection I get, if it's constructive, okay, I'll implement that. But if it's, you know, not, I'm just gonna have to kind of learn how to like rise above it.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
I think we're all sort of we're all quite sensitive creatures as well, aren't we, writers? I think, and so I mean, I think I've got the first time I kind of got rejected. I have massive rejection sensitivity. In general, I'm not very good with it, but it I think I'm worse on a kind of personal level than I am on a grand scheme of things, and I think sport has kind of helped with that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, because there's a lot of that, you know, you don't get picked for the team, or you don't get, you lose however many times, and then people are like, so I think I've kind of got used to it like that, but it still stings, and we pour our hearts and souls into these stories and into these books, and you just feel like, well, if you don't like my story, do you not like me? Is that my main character, she's basically me but on a really bad day, like, so it's you do feel like, yeah, if your characters are being rejected, then you sort of are as well. But
Yeah. So you mentioned that you are a qualified proofreader and editor. Do you think that gives you more of an edge editing your manuscript? Because, when I have to cut things out, or I'm told to cut things out, or I have to like tidy things up, it's very hard to look at it when you're the one writing it. Whereas when you have like a second opinion, I guess it's a bit more easier. How do you navigate that with your
so I think it does allow me to cut, because I'm sort of like, well, if I cut that down there, I can insert it somewhere else, and I can kind of, and I think from a big picture point of view, and when I'm writing it, it kind of gives me a bit more structure, maybe, I suppose. But it also gives me massive blindness, because I assume that it makes sense. And I assume that I haven't, duplicated words or duplicated sentences, which I have a horrible habit of doing, because sometimes I'll copy and paste stuff and move it around, and then I'll like double copy. And then I'd reread like the third or fourth chapter about 18 times, and then my friend read it and she was like, you've got the same sentence twice. And I was like, oh my God, really? Because I couldn't see it. But I've met an amazing editor who I actually met through Instagram. And she's currently doing a full review of my manuscript to kind of, it's more of a sense check and a plot hole, character consistency thing than it is a grammatical thing. But it definitely helps to have that second set of eyes, because you just become so blind to it after a few rereads. I think that's the same for everyone.
Okay. Also, what's like your writing process like? Are you like a prancer, or do you like plot everything down? Personally, I've tried to, pre-plan everything, and it's just not worked out well for me.
Yeah, so I love this question. And I've talked to a few people about it. When I wrote my previous one, what I actually did was I wrote all of the interesting bits first. I wrote all of the action points, all of the main scenes, all of the
Yeah.
And then I got to a point where I had 110,000 words, and I had to go back and write the boring bits, and I didn't want to do it. And my brain just can't and I realized that I just can't and I'd planned them all out, all of these action chapters, so I knew where everything needed to be. And I just couldn't make myself go back and fill in the gaps. So now with this one, what I've done is I started from the very beginning, and I've just written. And I think the other advantage of that is that, because I am a massive pantser, and sometimes I'll just be writing and something will happen mid-scene. And I've just literally been rewriting one of my chapters. And I'm like, oh, well, she's going to go meet him in the gardens then, is she? Because it's just come out of my pen and onto the page. And I'm like, oh, so that's happening now. But obviously, if you plot everything out and then something happens, you're a bit like, well, where do I fit that? Like, I want to do this, but where do I fit it in? Whereas if I'm just writing and it comes out, I'm like, okay, well, it's there now, so we'll just deal with that later down the line. It has meant, though, that the original length of the novel has basically doubled. It's
Oh my gosh.
It's kind of gone from a standalone to a probably 2 now. Yeah, which is a bit unfortunate, but words just kept coming out, so I couldn't help it.
Oh, that's amazing. So how do you deal with like stuff like writer's block? Because writer's block is real. Like I'll go through periods of times where I can't just write, and then like I'll have like a really energetic burst of like creativity for like 3-4 weeks, and then I'll be like gone for 4 months.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you deal with that?
I kind of, this is going to sound silly, I kind of treat writing like I do my streak on Duolingo.
Huh?
If I don't do it every day, I
Yeah.
really struggle to get back into it. And
Mhm.
I struggled with it for a really long time because I was like, what I need to write, it has to have purpose to the story and it needs to be really good and it needs to make sense. And then someone told me, you can edit bad words. You can't replace something that isn't there. And so
Yeah.
now I try really hard to just write something every day, even if it's like 500 words. I just write it out. And if it's rubbish, then I'll edit it and I'll replace it again tomorrow. But I find that the more I write, the
Mhm.
more I can write at the moment.
Yeah.
But I've been really lucky because I and because I think because I have to at the moment I have to squeeze it into really small periods of time, like really small bursts, like after the kids are in bed, or I've been really lucky while we've been away because like my husband's taken them out for the day and then I get like 5-6 hours to write and my brain doesn't know what to do with it. I'm like, oh my god,
Yeah.
this is amazing. But because I have had to squeeze them into such short bursts, I feel like I just get as much out as I can and then I deal with the quality of it later. But I am probably going to be leaving my corporate job and taking this on more full time for a little while. And so that's going to be really interesting to see because I think there's going to be a lot more writer's block and like I think it's going to really slow down the process a bit because it's just going to be a lot. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. It's so funny that you mentioned that because before I went full time with this, I would literally like on my like desk at my job, I would like write on the side while I was like doing my work and
Yeah.
like multitask,
Yeah.
or like on my breaks, I would just like write. And I wrote so much, but it was just like I couldn't do it. I'd come home and I'd be like stressed and tired and like after the commute and everything. But you just like write where you can and
Exactly. Notes on a
just
phone. I've got a notebook here. I
yeah,
printed all of my I've printed it all off so that I
yeah.
can edit it physically and like, you just do what you can when you can and it's
Mhm.
yeah, you just
Yeah,
got to make it work. But I don't know what it's going to be like when I have full days of
yeah.
doing what I want to do. But again, this has turned into 2 novels now, so I've got a second one to write.
So how do you keep track of everything? Like what tools do you use? Because for me, when I started off, it was just like pieces of paper and like notebooks and it's everywhere now. So I'm just trying to like combine it in one place.
So my handwriting is actually awful, and again, because of the Ehlers-Danlos, I've actually got really bad hands. So I used to write pen and paper, and I used to love
Yeah,
that, but I just can't anymore. I get such bad
yeah.
pain in my hands. So everything is on this laptop, backed up on
Mhm.
Google Docs, and it's just. But there's two things that I love to use. There's this website called Pacemaker Planner which people use, and it's just a word count tracker, but it gives you a little thing of confetti if you hit your word count for the day. Like you submit and you save your process, and it gives you like a little, yay, you hit your word count target. So, so that gives me like the little boost of yay, I hit my word count. Haven't I done well? So I love to use that because it just keeps me motivated. And then what I actually do is I just have a big Excel or a Google Doc,
Mhm.
and I just write down like the chapter that I'm on, the voice, the word count, because I don't like sometimes you end up with a really short chapter and you're like, that's really weird. We need to go back and fill that in. So I like to see the word counts of all of my chapters and then just like a brief summary. And that brief summary will include where I kind of think it might go. But the other thing I struggle with, this is going to make me sound like such a geek, but I if I say that a journey's taken like 4 days, I need it to have taken 4 days, and so I need to know like where in the not like where in the month, like doesn't go down that far, but in my head, I really struggle with visualizing it, and so I'll like write the day. Like day 1 of the story, day 10 of the story, day 15 of the story, just so I know how much time has kind of elapsed on my
Wow.
Excel sheet because I need to know, otherwise I just get really confused.
Oh my gosh, I need to like adopt what you're doing there because I have
I'll
I'm
send it
always
to you. I'll send
confused.
you my doc.
Always confused. Like I'm in the middle of writing my second book from my series, and I had to go back to the first book, and I was like, wait, when did this take place? Like
Did it
I said
actually?
3 months, 1 month, a year, and then I'm like trying to like work it out, and I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, because you say summer, and then the next thing you'll be writing a chapter, and it'll be snowing, and you're just like, wait,
Yeah.
that doesn't work. Even to the point where I have to work out the phase of the moon,
Uh-huh.
because I mention the moon quite a lot, and then I realized I was mentioning a crescent moon like over the space of a week, like 4 times. I'm like, that's not how moons work.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's quite geeky, but it works for me because it just helps my brain organize the timeline of things a bit better, I suppose. Yeah.
So we're gonna go on to your have you faced any like self-doubts or fears about, putting this story into the world, and how do you handle that?
God, yeah, like loads. The worst one was actually when I had to I had a big plot hole situation, and the only person near me was my husband, who
Yeah.
is not he's not a reader, like
Mhm.
at all. Doesn't read. Like he sort of he accepts my love of fantasy and romantasy books, but he does not read them himself. And so I'm then just like I had to talk to somebody about it. And I'm like, you're the only person here. You're just going to have to hear about the storyline of my novel. I'm sorry, this is just going to have to happen. But I was so nervous about it because
Yeah.
even though it's like, he's my husband, I've been with him for like 15 years, but I was sat there being like, this is a part of me, and sharing it it feels really scary. Um, and I think I'm still kind of there.
Mhm.
There's one other person and my editor who have actually seen the manuscript, so far. It's well, there are a couple of other people now, but it feels really exposing, I think.
Yeah.
And I think everyone feels that when they, in any kind of art, I think it's a really big thing, but particularly in writing, because people are gonna pick it apart and be like, oh, so this character's you and this character's so and so, and you're like, well, no, that's not really how it works, but in a way, yeah.
Yeah. I can
Yeah.
resonate with what you just said there. It's
Mhm.
very like exposing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And do you feel like you ever get over that? I don't think you ever get over that. I think it's
Yeah.
just like a continual thing.
Yeah. I think you get used to it,
Yeah.
maybe. Um, and yeah, and I think I don't think you ever get over it. No, I think every time you write, there's a little bit of yourself that you put into it, and I think that's always going to it's always going to feel quite, you know, I can't think of the word. I'm a terrible writer. I can't think of the word. But yeah, exposing it makes you feel like, yeah,
Daunting, maybe.
daunting. Yeah,
Yeah.
daunting.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but I think once you've done it, like I'm the kind of person who will give someone on my manuscript and then go sit in the next room and like with my ear to the door, being like, "Can I hear anything?" um,
Do you
yeah,
ever get that feeling where like maybe like you give somebody like the first chapter? Because I found like none of my family members either read or anything like that, so I just break it down into like one chapter, or I just tell them about it. Do you ever think like when you ask for feedback and it's like so bare, you're like, can you like give me
a
more?
little bit more. Yes,
Like,
yeah, 100%. I'm like, yeah, but did it make sense? And they're like,
yeah.
it was really good. I'm like, no, but did it make sense though? Like, do you get the story? Do you get the yeah, and especially with the fact like this is not dragons and fae and things like that. It's quite a simplistic sort of plot for a fantasy plot, so there's not a huge amount of complicated world building, but it's still a bit like I'm still there are still things where I'm like, yeah, but did you get it? Like,
Yeah.
because if you didn't get it, then no one's going to get it, so I need to make it more obvious, sort of thing. So yeah. Yeah.
So, what steps are you currently taking to prepare for publication?
I'm trying to push the social media is the big one right now.
Mhm.
Um, I'm pushing social media. I'm trying to build a network that I can then attack for ARC readers. I've got front cover art done, which I will. It is done now, so I can send it to you.
That's
um,
amazing. I can't wait to see it.
yeah, I love it. It's great. But I worked with a really great graphic designer on that, and
Mhm.
I'm going to get some more professional author pictures taken soon, next week. And I'm trying to tick all the boxes so that I can then push forward in an organized way, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's a big editing job right now. It's a big editing and rewrites, and that's kind of where we're at. And then provided that my editor agrees that I've left the story in a sensible place at the halfway point, which I think I have, then we will 100% crack on from there, and then yeah, it's going to be a case of I haven't hugely looked into, there's a lot of different ways of doing it. There's a lot of different, there's things like Books by, and the Kindle Unlimited approach, and there's all that sort of. I'm not quite there yet. I've done some research, but I'm not quite there. So we're just finessing all the bits, and then we'll drive forward from there, I think.
Is there anything that you've had to like edit out or leave out that you've that's really like hurt you?
Not so far.
Oh,
Not so far. I've had to go back and add a load of foreshadowing because the person who wrote it was just like it was great, but I didn't see it coming enough. It's a really hard line to walk, isn't it? Because you want the foreshadowing to be there, but then you also don't want to smack your readers in the face with it and be like, but why didn't you, you should have seen that like 5 chapters ago. Like I told you. I think that's something that people like Rebecca Yarros do really, really well. Yeah. So I haven't had to take anything out major yet, but it is possible. So I'm just gonna go with no, not so far.
Speaking of foreshadowing, do you have like any tips for writers and authors about how to tackle that? Because foreshadowing is actually something that I find really difficult. I don't think I do it right. And if I do it, I'm just like, maybe I knew it was coming, but I didn't really write it into the words. So maybe like the reader completely missed it. I don't know.
I think I possibly go too much that way as well sometimes, because I read a lot of books, and you see it coming, and it's not a bad thing, but I still enjoy all of these novels that I read, but I'm like, well, I know what's going to happen. I love it, but I know what's going to happen, and I think the tip I would give is I would always try and avoid, personally, I try and avoid foreshadowing in a kind of in the narrative. I'd avoid foreshadowing in setting. I like to have my characters do it. And I like to know what my characters are trying to achieve and who they really, really, really are, so that if anything happens, like I'm trying really hard not to like give any hints away now. if anything happens, you can go back and like review the actions of that character, and you're like, okay, actually that does make sense now. But it's more in what they say and what they do than it is about something in the narrative, for me.
Oh, that's amazing. That's a good tip. So how has your publishing journey so far changed the way you view your book or your identity as a writer?
I think it's kind of given me confidence, which is not what I expected. I kind of expected to be a bit beaten down by it, but I feel empowered, and I feel like it's given me confidence, because I feel like 10 years ago there's no way I wouldn't have attempted this in the way and the tools that we had available to us. I just don't think it was a practical dream, which is sad, but I think it's true. And that's why I went into a corporate job as an analyst, and that's why I do what I do on the 9 to 5. But if we'd had the availability of like indie publishing routes, and it had been made easier for people, I really think that more people, as they are now, which is amazing to see, would be going for it. And I think it's empowered a lot of us to feel like I can do that. And just given us the confidence to go for it, which is really nice. And I see a lot of women supporting women and in this community, and I love it. And I think it's just so nice. It's just so, yeah, it gives people confidence, and I really think that's an important thing.
Good. Yeah, I agree with you. That's really profound. So we're going to move on to your story and characters a little bit because I know it's not published yet. So we're not going to try to give away a lot. So the concept of 118 villagers giving up, a year of their lives for vengeance is powerful. What inspired that part of the story?
So weirdly, there's a song by Taylor Swift, Who's Afraid of Little Old Me? And that was on in the radio, and my daughter was singing along to it. And Remy, the main character, the FMC, she basically kind of just jumped fully formed into my head.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of revenge, of her being, okay, spoiler, that's not really a spoiler, but having been murdered before the story even starts, and then being brought back for revenge, it was a case of, well, how does that happen? Like, she can't just spring out of the earth and be like, I'm going to go kill you now. Like, it had to feel like she was kind of indebted. She would have quite happily just stayed dead. But the fact that she's given a purpose, and she's given a debt to work off. She's, all of these people, children, old people, all of them have given a whole year of their lives to bring her back for a certain amount of time so that she can get revenge for a girl from that village who was previously killed in the same practice. And so I think she needs that drive, because it kind of breaks her. Bringing her back kind of breaks her. And so I think she needs that drive to push forward and have that purpose of revenge. Because without that, she would be probably randomly stabbing people in other towns. Like, she'd just be running rampant. Like, she'd be the villain without that purpose, I think. The key point. Yeah.
Oh, that's profound. So Remy's arc seems to flip the fairy tale trope on its head. How did you approach writing her transformation from victim to weapon? I think you've touched upon it a bit.
Yeah, it's kind of, because she's not a chosen one. She doesn't have any previous to this. She was a weak little girl. She was a princess. She'd smile and nod, and she'd do everything that people asked her to. And then this happens, and she's brought back. And you don't see so much of the actual transformation. You see who she was before, and you see who she is now. And what you do get is she has occasional episodes, for lack of a better term. Like, she comes face to face with this king again, and it's how she, her reaction is visceral, it's violent, it's emotional, and it's the fact that, she's been brought back, but she's not unbreakable. She's not this. She is a weapon, and she has a purpose. But it's those little episodes kind of give you glimpses back to be like, well, she wasn't made for this. She was a princess. She is vulnerable at certain points. And then it's how the people around her kind of drive her the right way or the wrong way, or she's very, very influenced by external forces, shall we say, without giving too much away.
So how did you balance writing something, fantastical with deeply, embedded human emotions like grief, sacrifice, and vengeance?
Yeah, she's quite flippant about it all. When she's grumpy. She's the moral, at least in the first half of the story. She's the morally grey one. She's the grumpy one. She's the one who snaps at people and throws things at people. And she very much deflects. And there is a bit of banter. And she finds what she thinks is. She finds what she thinks is found family, and she is kind of moving forward with that purpose. And but it is quite deep. And I suppose the way I balanced it is I just kind of balanced her relationship with other characters and that bit of banter. And every time there's a really serious chapter, I try and make a bit of a more chilled one afterwards. Like, there's a lot of up and down. I don't like to be like, have all of the drama. There's I think the worst chunk I've written is 3 chapters in a row, which is quite, and then you get a ball or something to recover. But yeah, So I think it's just balancing the tension with kind of more day-to-day actions, I suppose. But you've always got this undercurrent of, you always know what her purpose is. And so you've always kind of got that in the back of your head, even if she is like, you know, throwing teacups or other things.
So the king sounds like a classic beautiful monster. Can you tell us a bit more about how you wrote him?
Yeah, so I sort of, the most you get from him, he's quite, so that there's two levels of this monster, right? There's the king, and then you've got his three sons. And the three
Yeah.
sons are kind of intended to be a buffer between
Mhm.
between Remy and the king, but also kind of between the readers and the king. So a
Yeah.
lot of the interaction you get with the king is either directly through the sons,
Mhm.
or it's in a very like court setting,
Mhm.
up until a certain point. And so it's how does, like, she has to see him. She is basically constantly around this man who
Mhm.
killed her.
Yeah.
And it's how Remy deals with that and how she interacts with the sons more than the king in the first kind of up to a certain point. And then obviously there is more
Um,
interaction.
so obviously like when you write villains or complex characters, because I've actually, as when I became like a writer and I started writing like complicated characters, I kind of like, when it comes to villains and heroes, I'm like, villains are just kind of misunderstood and they just kind of believe in in what they're
Yeah,
doing.
no, you're right. You're right. And he does ultimately.
Yeah.
The good thing about him, it's not really a good thing about him gaining immortality, is that, you know, there's going to be the reason he did it, he really truly believes that if he is immortal, there'll be
Hmm.
no border, there'll be no succession wars, there'll be no
Hmm.
border struggles, there'll be no like lack of plenty in his kingdom. Like, yeah, the other kingdoms, they can go and do whatever they want to do, but he will be king for, he can be king for as long as he wants, really, in his head. And so he's like I'm the king, and I'm the king for, you know, in years uncountable. And even then you've got my sons, and even then my son has an heir. And so he just sees it as like this sort of ruling family dynasty, but he believes that the common people won't suffer for it, because he's just
Yeah.
like, well, our borders will be safe, and no, there'll be no wars about who is king after me. And
Yeah.
you know, it's, he does kind of believe in himself, but he is also just quite an unpleasant man.
He sounds like it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I guess like he's seeing it from the perspective of ruling from the bigger picture, but he's not seeing it from, you know, the masses perspective where it's like this is a dictatorship.
Yeah, exactly. And also he doesn't consider the viability or the you know, the rightness of what he's done to get there. You know, but I think another key thing, again, without giving too much away in this novel, is the concept of truth. Like, whose truth matters? You know, we see Remy's point of view, and we assume that everything she says and everything she does is true, but she can only do what she can do with the information that she has available. And so it's kind of the concept of the, you know, potentially unreliable narrator. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. So, did any of the villagers' stories emerge as important or surprising to you while writing?
I think Milo is Abigail is the girl who was originally sacrificed, who they are trying to get revenge for, ultimately. She was the one who died and never survived out. And so Milo lost his sister, and he's
Mhm.
become Remy's guard, and he's kind of been forced into this basically big brother, possibly with other benefits, role, which sounds awful. I just realized I put him as a big brother, and there's definitely some scenes where you don't want to be thinking that.
Yeah.
But he's kind of been forced into this role that he didn't really want. And I originally just wrote him as this very stoic, very grumpy guard.
Yeah.
And he became a lot more to me, because then you have to think about, well, why, you know, he wants revenge for his sister. Fine, okay, but what if he brought back this woman on the premise of she's just going to be a weapon for me and I will just use her however I want. But then what if she's more human than he expected?
Yeah. So we're going to go on to world building and themes. So there's clearly a strong mythological or underworld element. What kind of research or inspiration helped you build this world?
Well, that's a great question. So there's quite a few references to kind of Celtic mythology in this. There's something called the Ogham Fused, which is it was an alphabet that was solely based on trees. Well, not solely based on trees, but it was originally. So each letter of the alphabet is related to a tree, which is related to a kind of symbolism. And if you look very, very carefully on the front cover art that I will send over at some point, there is one of the runes hidden in the front cover, and it's important because it's the one that Remy she kind of comes back with.
Mhm.
And I didn't want to make it completely mythological, but I also didn't want to sort of sit too heavily on an existing mythology. So I sort of took it's more around the idea of symbolism than it is anything else.
Mhm.
And the idea that there is magic, but it has been outlawed for many, many years, apart from for the king and what he did. And
Mhm.
there's a witch in the village, and she obviously, but there's not a huge amount of magic in it, with the exception of kind of the ritual of immortality, if you like. But it's more around the symbolism of nature, I would say, than it is anything else, because that was a very big thing to the Celts, and it's something. And again, growing up in Wales, it's something that resonates with me quite a lot. So it's interesting.
How did you approach writing about immortality and death in a way that felt fresh or different from typical fantasy stories?
That's a great question too. I think there's a lot of avoidance of death in fantasy stories right now. You know, people die, but they don't stay dead for one reason or another. And this is that too. But I think with adding in the idea that she's got a limited amount of time, you know, that puts a clock on it. And I think, you know, she doesn't know what is going to happen when or if she achieves her goal. Like, she might just fall down in a bunch of bones when she kills the king. And so that's an element of, I think it's just what I wanted to include was not just this people die but they don't stay dead, and it's a thing, but more of a, we don't know what happens in life in general. We don't know what happens, not truly.
Yeah.
And so I kind of tried to play with that idea a little bit more of like, yeah, he's immortal and he's scared of death, and that's one thing, but she has to tick all of these boxes, and she's like, I don't know if every time I tick a box I'm like killing a chunk of me. And so that's kind of how I tried to make it a bit different. You just get a lot more uncertainty from her point of view, whereas in other books, a lot of the time it's just like, I'm going to kill this person and I'm going to feel good about it, you know?
Yeah. So themes of sacrifice and collective action are central. So what made you want to tell a story where so many people are involved in a single act of resurrection and revenge?
I think I don't really know where that idea came from, but I think it felt like it just gave her more accountability. I think if one person had been like, I'm going to tie my life to yours and we'll go and we'll do this, and you know, I've given my life to, and that would work from a kind of fated mates or an enemies to lovers point of view. But
Yeah.
I didn't really feel like it worked for Remy. I felt like putting her that, and she does have relationships in this book, but putting her that reliant on another person felt a bit much, especially because she has so much doubt about what she's doing, and
Yeah.
you know, her approach to everything. And so I felt like if she was tied to one person, she might just, as I said at the beginning, I think just be like, nah, I'm not doing that. I'm off to stab some people. Whereas she's lived in this village for 5 years, you know, training and trying to get her head around what she's being asked to do. And she sees these children who are going to live for a year less because of her. She sees these old people who, like, she'll have seen old people die in the time that she was at the village, and she sort of thinks, you know, could they have had another year if it wasn't for me? You know, so she's literally presented with it on a daily basis for 5 years and then like wound up and gone, off you go kill him now. So it's really challenging for her, I think. And I think that that's why I did it. I don't know exactly why I did it. It just kind of, as these things sometimes do, it was just sort of there. But I think that's the importance of it, because it gives wider accountability, as opposed to just being one person and she's just like, oh, well, I'm not so bothered about you. But that little girl in the village who's going to live for a year less, that's, and I think that's the humanity she has left.
Yeah. So moving on to your indie experience, what's something you've learned about the publishing industry that you wish you'd known at the beginning?
I think I wish I'd known more about vanity presses, potentially. That potentially a great way for people to publish if they want to go. But there are some people who do just take, I think they take it a bit too far, if you like. And so I've had loads of people contact me being like, oh, we want your book, and that makes me as a writer feel really, really good. And then they're like, yeah, but you need to pay us like £10,000. And I'm like, yeah, no, I don't have £10,000 to pay. Like we accept the cost as indie authors, but some people just take it way too far. There are some people I've come across who are like, yeah, I'll help you and we'll do everything and you can keep all your royalties, but you have to pay us this massive amount of money first. But in the same sense, I also kind of wish I'd known just how much is out there, and the approaches and the amazing skilled people that you can work with, because I don't think I would have put it off for as long if I'd known that. Like if I'd known that there are all of these, fantastic designers and brilliant editors who are very, very happy to be support each other, like I said before, I think. Yeah, so I think my message to anyone who's considering it would be just go for it, because you'll always find support that you need, whether it's readers or designers or editors or publishers, or there's always people willing to help and answer questions, which I think sometimes other people think that the publishing industry, the indie industry, and writers are very standalone people, but we're not. That's the thing that I found. And I think I kind of love that.
That's amazing. Yeah. So what's been like the hardest part of getting your story to this stage, and what keeps you going?
I think I hit a wall a good sort of halfway through, and I was just like, I've got so many words left to write, and I know I'm nowhere near and especially it being a lot longer than I was thinking. I got to a point and I was like, is it really worth it? Like, this is just, and then things just kind of started to flow again. And I've really, really enjoyed writing it. Like I actually have. It's been stolen moments, but I've loved it. What I found hard is, again, I find the social media really hard. I find it really hard. Just trying to market a book that's not out yet with snippets of quotes and snippets of story, but you don't want to give too much away, and you've got to keep people interested and grow the base, because if you don't do that, you've got no ARC readers and you've got no audience. So I found that quite hard, and that's something that I'm still working on, because we've got some time. So
that actually feeds into my next question. So how are you balancing the creative side of writing with the business side of being an indie author?
Very hard. I'm quitting my job. That's how. Yeah, ultimately, I suppose that's the answer to the question. I'm quitting my corporate job. Most likely going to be leaving a corporate job. It's not a done deal, but it's something that's being discussed in my house, because I can't do it all, and especially not with I've got a 4 and a 5-year-old. The summer holidays are coming up, and so I have to figure out how I balance that, and so it is quite difficult. But I think I'm just going to keep writing in whatever time I can, even if it's like 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, and I've never been a nighttime writer. Some people write until like 3 a.m. I can't do it. I'm like, I'm tired, I need to sleep. But yeah, I think stolen moments, and I'm just going to keep trucking at it, and just yeah, I think I really truly believe that the reward of the freedom and how I feel mentally being able to get words on paper,
Yeah.
it's just worth the time that I have to kind of do a real job or do the dishes or stuff like that. So I'm just gonna do what I need to do for now, and then we'll see in a couple of months' time if this becomes a full, talk to me in 6 months and I might be in my office just as a writer. We don't know.
Amazing. So future plans and final thoughts. So what do you hope readers take away from Remy's story?
I think the key thing is that think about who you trust is a key one. Think about who you trust, and also, I think her story is that anyone can overcome obstacles. You might just need to find a way around instead of over or through. I think a lot of people struggle at the moment because they have, everyone has big things going on in their lives, and I'm not saying that there's a solution to every problem, because but if you talk to people and you work at it, I think as long as you trust the right people, obviously, I think that talking to people and taking away that relationships can still be the most important thing, even if you think something's gone really, really wrong, is a good message.
Yeah. So if you could give advice to another writer in your shoes, sitting with a finished manuscript, unsure of their next steps, what would it be?
I think just go. Just go for it. Just send it to find an editor you trust. That's a key thing. Especially with the whole Meta scandal right now and the whole thing with AI, generative AI.
Oh my God.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about that. I would really say I've had this fear of, like, if I give my manuscript to someone, is it going to just end up stolen? It's a real worry. But yeah, I'd say find an editor you trust, work with them, and get your manuscript to a point where you're comfortable, and then just go for it.
Yeah. And then next, so what's next for you? And this story, do you see it as, well, you've mentioned it's part of a series potentially.
I think it's going to be one of two now. Yeah, I do.
Or even something, for screen or anything like that. What do you see for the future?
I think this one will be two. There's a very clear stopping point in the middle, and it's kind of cliffhanger. It's kind of not cliffhanger. It's not like no one's going to hate me for where I've left it, but I hope that it would make people want to read the second one.
Yeah.
And then I have there's a good 3 other storylines bouncing around that I have refused to write, because if I start on something else, I will then get distracted. So there's a couple more in there, a few other interesting ideas that I might work on, but we'll see. But I've got to finish. I gotta finish the second half of this one first.
Oh, thank you very much for sitting down with me and answering these questions. And I will be definitely rooting for you. And I just can't wait to see what more things that you have to write. And I'll definitely be there.
Thank you so much. It's been lovely to talk to you. I very happily talk to you again about other parts of the journey when I get further down the road.